wedding planning friends, and welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for clicking on my picture. If you like what you see, please like and subscribe to get weekly videos on wedding planning tips and advice. Today, we're going to talk about something that I chat with a lot of my clients about in the initial kind of planning process of your wedding, and that is, should you or could you DIY your wedding bar? So what do I mean by DIYing your wedding bar? This is basically just saying that you're going to be supplying all of the alcohol for your wedding and not have it catered by a bar company or an alcohol catering service or somebody, whether that's through your food caterer providing alcohol, whatnot. The reason people like to do this is it can potentially save you a lot of money, as you can just buy bulk alcohol at places like Costco and save money on the actual alcohol itself, but you also won't have to pay for the labor that comes with a catering service as well and their whole staff. So it can be cost effective. However, there's a lot of things to keep in mind and consider when you are going down this route, and a lot more small details to be mindful of and pay attention to if this is a route you're going to go for your wedding. So first of all, before you even decide this is something that you want to do for your wedding, you need to make sure that the venue that you have selected allows you to bring in your own alcohol. So a lot of different vendors or a lot of different venues have different laws and permits when it comes to supplying alcohol, and whether that can be self-serve or self-hosted, self-provided by you, or whether you need to have an actual licensed and certified alcohol server. So this varies depending on the venue and what their liquor licensing is. So that's the very first thing you want to do before you even go down any more of these steps, is make sure that that's even an option for you at your particular venue. So if that's an option for you and you've decided we're going to do this, we're going to supply my own alcohol, the first thing you want to do is to decide exactly what you want to have to serve at your wedding. So obviously the more options you have, the more expensive it's going to be. So typically I always recommend, if you're supplying your own alcohol, the fewer options the better. You don't need to supply every possible liquor. You don't need to have an open bar. Typically, if you are having beer and wine and maybe one or two liquor options, you've got your bases covered, your guests are going to be happy. A lot of my clients even opt to just have beer and wine only and not even provide any sort of liquor options, because then you don't have to provide any mixing content to go with that. Also, if you're only going to have one bartender, or if it's self-serve, then creating cocktails is going to be really difficult in that scenario. So decide what exactly you want to have served. Beer, wine, and a signature cocktail is something that I always recommend, because then you're getting kind of all three varieties, and by having a signature cocktail, a lot of times you can make that be an option that's pre-made. So here in Montana, something like a huckleberry lemonade, like vodka lemonade with huckleberries, that can be pre-mixed already in a dispenser, and whether you're going to have it self-serve or have a bartender back there, that'll just make it really efficient and quick for people to go up and grab a drink and not have to wait for an actual cocktail to be mixed and shaken or whatever it may be. So the next step is calculating how much you're going to need. So this can be fairly tricky, and it's really dependent on your particular guest list. So there isn't really like one overall calculator to come up with this, although there are some helpful resources that can help give you an estimate, and then you can kind of go from there based on your knowledge of your guest list. So say you have a lot of your friends from college that you know are big beer drinkers, and they don't really drink that much wine, so you probably don't need to supply as much wine as kind of a standard alcohol calculator might recommend you do. This could also be location dependent, so somewhere like Montana, craft beer is really big around here and not so much wine. However, if you go somewhere like Northern California or Napa Valley, if you're in wine country, you're probably going to be wanting to supply more wine than beer. Take into consideration who you plan on invite, who is going to be in attendance at your wedding, and kind of what their preferences are to the best of your knowledge. To help start your estimate counts here, so first of all, let's keep in mind, so one bottle of wine will get you 5 glasses of wine. One bottle of champagne will fill roughly 8 champagne flutes. One 750 milliliter bottle of liquor will fill about 18 cocktails. And one keg, which is 15.5 gallons, will serve 124 pints. So that's kind of your basis to estimate how many drinks per liquor type will get you. And then sort of a basic rule of thumb that we use to start out is 2 drinks per guest for the first hour, and then 1 drink per guest per hour after that. So again, that's just kind of a basis for how much to estimate total drinks, and then go from there and kind of figure out exactly what kind of each liquor from there you want to provide. There is a really helpful alcohol calculator that I will link in the description below that will kind of help give you a more specific estimate as far as how much wine, beer, liquor categorized to have. So go ahead and click that in the description if you need more help with that. Okay, so the next thing to consider is who's going to be serving. So again, this might have to do with the venue that you're at and whether maybe they allow you to bring in your own alcohol, but you have to have it served by a licensed and certified alcohol server, or you are able to have self-serve, whatever that may be. If you have to hire in actual professional bartenders or bring a friend in, make those decisions next and make sure you have a good plan in place. Also keep in mind that you're going to want 1 bartender per every 50 guests. So if you're planning on having 200 people at your wedding, don't just count on 1 bartender to do the job, because you're going to end up with really long lines at your bar. It's going to be really slow, and all of your guests are going to be spending their time waiting in line for drinks and not actually enjoying your wedding. If you're providing a full bar, or you're going to have a lot of non-pre-mixed cocktails, so like they will be made to order, keep that in mind too, and you'll want an extra person on staff just to kind of help with that time as well. Okay, this next one is huge, and it's a very important part of a bar in alcohol, but a lot of people forget about it. So don't forget the ice. Ice is a huge detail when it comes to your wedding bar, and make sure that you have more than enough. Like, overestimate what you could possibly need, especially if you have a summer wedding, and have tons and tons and tons and tons of ice. So a good starting point is 1 pound per guest, and this is going to seem like a lot, but the reason that you want to have extra ice is you not only are going to want to have ice to keep your drinks cold, especially if you're going to have them out in an open, like a trough or some kind of bin, and you have drinks on ice, that melts very quickly, especially if you're having a summer wedding, outdoor wedding out in the sun. But you also want to make sure that you have enough ice to put in drinks too, and you want to keep those separate. So make sure you have enough ice to have backup for icing drinks and keeping them cold, and also backup ice to actually put in the drinks for drinking ice. So speaking of commonly forgotten items, that brings me to our next point. Here's a list of details that you will need to incorporate into your bar and make sure that you have if you are providing it for yourself. Number 1, backup coolers for ice. If you have not done a tour of your wedding venue or final walkthrough, make sure that when you do that, you're paying attention to the storage that they have for ice. So whether they have a freezer behind the bar or some sort of kitchen area that has backup coolers, freezers, whatever, make sure that you are paying attention to the storage you have for this ice and knowing if you need to bring in some more backup coolers to store your backup ice. Number 2, don't forget an ice scoop. You'll need something to scoop the ice into the drinks, and you don't want to be using a glass, like an actual glass, because if you put it in a tub of ice, it could break, and then you have a whole huge mess on your hands, and all of that ice that's prepared already, it needs to go because you might have broken pieces of glass in it. So don't forget an ice scoop. Number 3, liability insurance. Whether your venue requires it or not, I always recommend purchasing some sort of alcohol liability insurance. Number 4, don't forget a wine and beer opener. Number 5, cups, obviously. Decide whether you're going to have disposable cups or actual glassware. If you're providing it yourself, I recommend disposable so that you don't have to figure out who's going to wash and return any physical glassware that you get. Number 6, drinking dispensers. So if you're going to have pre-made drinks like I mentioned earlier, having some sort of dispenser to put them in. This is also great for water and non-alcoholic beverages. Which brings me to the final one, number 7, water. Don't forget water, please, whether it's going to be water bottles or having a drinking dispenser that's continually filled with water. I have seen several weddings, not weddings that I worked, but weddings I've attended, that kind of forgot about the whole water situation, and we got to the end of the night and all that was left to drink was beer and liquor and no water. So So don't let that be you. Make sure that you have more than enough water to last through the end of the night for all of your guests. Hopefully you wrote those down or you're paying attention to all the little details that I just listed. Supplying your own alcohol can be very cost effective for your wedding. Just make sure that you are really planning ahead and making sure that you have all of the pieces to the puzzle figured out and that you aren't forgetting any of these important details so that you can have a successful wedding bar. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, please like and subscribe to get weekly videos on wedding planning tips and advice, and we'll see you next week.